All right, folks, we're back with the continuation of our 2014 MLB Division Preview. And this episode, we're going to be talking about the American League Central. The Detroit Tigers are the defending champions. Last year, Cleveland and Kansas City made things a little bit interesting with their development as a team in the youth. And Chicago had a disappointing year, and Minnesota is in full rebuild mode. So speaking of the Detroit Tigers, they had a very eventful offseason, as we talked about in the previous podcast about the offseason transaction review. They traded Prince Fielder, got Ian Kinsler. They traded Doug Fister for kind of just to open up a spot for Drew Smyly. Johnny Peralta left. They moved Cabrera to first base. Nick Calistenos is really going to try to step in and be the third baseman of the future. Kyle Smith, you want to start us off talking about this lineup? And it's a pretty deep lineup, but there also could be potential age issues here creeping up on this team pretty quick.
Yeah, I think they did a good job of trying to inject some youth into this lineup. Really like the Jose Iglesias pickup. A lot of people are saying his bat's not going to translate into to what he showed last year, but I think that's fine considering he's one of the most elite shortstops in the game defensively. I really like that they're going to be moving Calistenos to third base. Should provide better defense than what Cabrera was providing. I like the Kinsler pickup because you kind of had a gap there. I thought it was a very unnecessary move, however, and I definitely docked them on the trade. I think they got the worst end of the trade without question. I want to say Kinsler's in the second year now of a $75 million deal, which is definitely overpaying considering the decline he's been experiencing lately, not only in home runs but stolen bases. His overall defensive ratings are becoming much more limited. I think you're really hoping that guys like Torrey Hunter continue to have the success they had last year. Austin Jackson is an ongoing development type player. Andy Dirks is going to struggle as usual, but he'll be there in left field to count it. Rajai Davis should hopefully challenge him for some playing time. I like the lineup.
I think they'll platoon Dirks and Davis. Davis obviously brings that speed element to the team that it's solely lacking in terms of just pure, like a legit stolen base threat for somebody who could get 40.
Only guy.
And
yeah.
Jackson himself isn't running nearly as much as he did early in his career. The last 4 years he's gone 27 steals, 22, 12, then 8 last year. So in terms of just someone who can steal the base, Davis provides that speed element, and that's probably why they picked him up. Is because I feel like Dombrowski's overall I would say is a good general manager, no doubt. I also feel like he's a little bit old school in making sure that he has everything that the old school team had in terms of defense and power guys and things like that, and that's why I feel like Davis was brought in, was to be that speed guy for the team.
Yeah, he's very old school, new school, a great hybrid of both. When you look at his teams on papers, they don't necessarily blow you away, but they always have top production.
Yeah.
I think that the Victor Martinez-Cabrera combo is going to be what carries them throughout this year. I think they're sorely going to miss Prince Fielder. I think that's production you can't replace.
I think that
what you do, but
the biggest issue with Prince Fielder to me is going to be his clubhouse respect and element, especially the very good friendship he developed with Miguel Cabrera. If you followed them on Twitter, and we also brought this up in the other podcast, they were tweeting pictures to each other with each other's kids and how much friendship they've developed, and that's going to be so sorely missed. And especially with Jim Leland gone, they're going to have to develop a new kind of clubhouse feel.
Yeah.
And that's going to be something that they are going to, have to work on to figure out what type of clubhouse structure they're going to have. Who's going to step up as that, somewhat vocal leader like Prince was, or the face, kind of like Jim Leland a little bit.
Yeah, and that being said, I don't think you could have picked a better candidate than Osmus, though. I think he knows the organization. He's been there.
He's been around the game forever. He was a very, very good catcher with Houston for a very long time.
Very long time, and he played around a lot of really good players, the Craig Biggios, the Bagwells. So he's a very experienced. He's even, I think, caught Roger Clemens for a couple years. So.
Andy Pettit, Roy Oswald, Billy Wagner. I mean, there was a lot of good players in those Houston teams. He's a great closer. Great. Look at his numbers. Billy Wagner, incredible. But we're getting off topic.
But yeah, I think that this lineup's going to suffer a little bit. Now, I got a question. I'm pretty sure that they got Lombardozzi in the
Yes.
Nationals trade.
Yeah, he's
That's an
kind of a
intriguing
utility
guy.
infielder guy.
If any of those guys start to struggle in left field, or if Hunter goes down, you have a guy who can replace Cal Stanos at third and roll him into outfield where he's been playing.
Yeah, they were trying him in the
minor
outfield in the minors
Yeah.
in case they, because they had Prince and Cabrera locked in.
Yeah.
And they had Martinez this year in the last year of his deal at DH. And, there's a couple things I'd like to bring up for the lineup. I think Austin Jackson is going to bounce back to his 2012 numbers where he had a 370 on base, batted 300, 479 slugging. Is a very, very good player. I expect that's more the true Austin Jackson than what we saw last year. I feel like he missed some time and kind of got out of rhythm and was always had nagging injuries. So I really look for Austin Jackson to bounce back, have 120 runs at the top of that lineup, getting batted in all the time. And Torrey Hunter, I feel like that he's kind of just waiting to win a World Series and he's going to retire.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that he's a bad player or anything. I think that he just wants that and then he's just going to walk away.
Yeah,
I mean,
agree.
he's still a very effective player. Moving into a corner outfield, it was very good. Obviously, he's one of the most famous and entertaining center fielders of the last 15 years defensively. Miguel Cabrera, obviously MVP candidate, and Calistenos. What do you expect out of the highly touted prospect?
I think that calling him highly touted is kind of starting to get a little overrated.
He's top 30 prospect.
Yeah, no, and
That's
I'm not,
highly touted. He's
Yeah,
the best prospect
I'm not-
in that system for the last 3 years,
I'm not
probably.
ignoring that he has been a highly touted prospect. I think he's been an overly touted prospect because of
The trade rumors that he was always involved in.
the trade rumors he's always involved in, and the fact that he's always been Detroit's top prospect like the last 2 years.
It was like 3 years. Yeah.
3 years, yeah. So they've been talking about him for a while. I think this is a guy who's not going to blow you away. But that being said, he doesn't really have to in this lineup. I mean, if
Yeah.
the guy hits
He can
275,
kinda settle
that's a
in.
win.
Yeah.
That's a huge win for Detroit. So hopefully he can get into that. Lombardozzi is still a young guy. He's only played 3 years in the majors, so you got some wiggle room there as far as that's concerned. But what's really going to carry this team, and the most exciting thing about this club that I find intriguing, is going to be that pitching staff with the increased defense.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see how much better some of these, could Verlander be even better? Could he post a Kershaw-like season, sub-2 ERA with the defense like this?
The defense is definitely an improvement. Iglesias is an incredible shortstop defensively. He's not Simmons, but no one is from Atlanta. He's definitely a top 5 defensive shortstop in my view. Cabrera, negative at third base, clearly. And even if he's just average at first, that's a good improvement. And it'll help him keep him healthy. And he'll be able to, hopefully not have the nagging injuries he had a little bit last year. Calistenos, even if he's average, upgrade over at third base over Cabrera. And then Kinsler to Afonte is probably a wash to me at this point. And if Kinsler's a little bit healthier, he might actually be a slight improvement. But then you got Davis in the outfield now who can cover a lot of ground. Torrey Hunter's still average. Austin Jackson's an average defensive outfielder. So that defense is really going to help, as Kyle said, that pitching staff sustain its incredible success last year. Their top 3 in terms of just numbers and talent could be the best in baseball.
Yeah.
Obviously, Justin Verlander's won Cy Youngs before and is always a threat to win more. Max Scherzer got the job done last year, upcoming free agent. He's going to get a monster deal at the end of this year if they don't extend him now. And Anibal Sanchez had an absolutely incredible season. Like, what he did last year, if he wouldn't have gotten hurt, Kyle, he probably, if he sustained it, would have been the Cy Young winner last year.
Yeah.
He was the best pitcher on that staff the first 3 months of the year. Then he had nagging injuries and Scherzer, and then Verlander. Say what you want about his 3.46 ERA being the worst he's had since 2008. In the playoffs, he had a 0.39 ERA with 31 strikeouts in 23 innings. And the game he had, I believe, in Game 5 against Oakland versus Sonny Gray was one of the best pitching matchups I've seen in years in the playoffs.
So much fun
It was
to watch.
incredible. So, Kyle, what do you think about the top 3? And then also, with the Fister trade, what do you think about Drew Smyly finally getting that rotation spot?
I think Smiley's going to be a really interesting guy. I don't really count on him. I'm a little bit more excited about Rick Porcello.
I agree with
I
that.
think that he's a ground ball pitcher who suffered from horrible defense the last couple years, and I think that with that infield being much improved, he's going to see his numbers drop a little bit, and he's going to be doing really well. And I think that I think he's the guy who I'd be counting on most. Obviously, they believe in Robbie Ray to hopefully be a midseason call-up. It's the only way I could really see them justifying that trade, even if it's just in the pen, which they severely need help with. I don't necessarily think Max Scherzer is going to repeat the success he had last year. I think that he tries to strike too many guys out, and I don't think his pitches have enough sink on them to make consistent contact. So I think that 2.9 ERA is going to raise to a more about a 3.5 ERA, which is good for the Tigers because they'll get that value they want as far as the contract is concerned. He did pitch a career high in innings, and he's got a big frame, so hopefully he'll continue to lumber through a lot of innings. But that being said, he needs to figure out a better way to get guys out without having to strike them out, which is a rare thing to have to say about a pitcher. Darvish is the same way. Like, there comes a certain point where striking everyone out isn't the most effective strategy. You have to be able to reduce your pitch count a little bit.
Yeah, look at Cliff Lee, folks.
Yeah, exactly. Cliff Lee's the perfect example of the perfect pitcher.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't think anybody would really argue that. He doesn't even have sink that much on his fastball.
He's
just that good.
He knows exactly where his pitches are going to go, and David Price kind of reminds me of Cliff Lee in terms of how they control walks now. But, the bullpen, that's always been kind of their Achilles heel. They finally went out and spent some money, and they signed Joe Nathan, who had an incredible season for the Rangers, although he is running up on 40 pretty close. So is Bruce Rondon ready to be that lights-out eighth-inning guy, or do they finally have a bullpen? Because I'm not seeing the complete package in the bullpen yet.
I don't think he's ready to be lights out, but I think with this pitching staff and the power that this offense has, he doesn't necessarily have to be. I think he's going to be in a lot of games that are separated by 2 runs or more. So I think that he'll have an opportunity to really kind of ease his way into the season without too much pressure because Nathan's taking that off. And Nathan will be a great closer for them. I thought that was a great signing. Albuquerque still got speed, and so maybe he does something. And, they obviously brought in Jabba Chamberlain, who could possibly do something. I wouldn't count on it, Detroit fans, but it's not impossible. I just don't think he has it anymore. So that being said, I think this is a team that I'm really looking forward to seeing how some of their additions affect them, because this is kind of like it's like one of the biggest overhauls without really being that big of an overhaul. Just because of the new general manager, you got rid of a $200 million player. You added a OBP machine, and Kinsler, well, not machine, but pretty consistent OBP guy. He's had OBPs over 370 in a couple seasons, so I think him not batting leadoff will take a lot of that pressure off of him. So maybe a new fit would be good for him, so I'm counting on him to have a bounce-back season as far as at least getting on base is concerned. But how do you feel about this pitching staff going into October? Are they completely contingent upon those top 3 guys being healthy, or if one of those guys, like Anibal Sanchez, who's a little injury-prone, Verlander had the abdominal issue, Scherzer's not really been injured the last 2 or 3 years, maybe he gets a bug. Do you think they can survive that type of injury, considering they have guys that could literally put up 5-6 ERAs without them?
Yeah, I mean, this pitching staff is very top-heavy. There's not much depth in the minors. They don't have many prospects. I do really like Rick Porcello as well. Just like you, I could see him having a very good year, like a 3.5, close to an ERA. The defense will help, but his strikeout rate, K/9's also gone up for 3 straight years. So if that continues, at least at that rate with the added defense, that in and of itself could really help him out. I would be the most concerned with Sanchez just because he's always had a little bit of injury issues. And then Scherzer, we all know Verlander's a horse. I'm not too worried about the abdominal issue. I mean, like we said, he was incredible in the playoffs. If I'm counting on one guy on this pitching staff to be that ace and give it the ball Game 7, Game 1, Game 5, whatever, it's Verlander. I mean, he's still the opening day starter for a reason. He's still the ace for a reason. And, is there anything else you want to add, Kyle, before we do some over-unders on the Detroit Tigers?
No, I just hope that Victor Martinez keeps that ACL healthy because they really sucked when he was out 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Or at least it hurt them quite a bit. They probably would have won the World Series if he had been on their team. I mean, that's kind of hard to say, but I'm just saying, like,
Right.
he was that good when he came back last year that you got to think with the numbers Prince Fielder put up in 2011, which were incredible, like 125 RBIs, 35 home runs, plus 350 OBP, incredible average. So if they were to get that Victor Martinez, I think that's going to be the real key for them.
Okay, so start some over-unders. Joe Nathan, your boy, over under 40 saves.
Over. Without question. He'll get a lot of opportunities and he'll capitalize.
I agree with you. Rick Porcello. I just threw the number out there, so let's do it. ERA 3.5, which would be a massive improvement over his career so far.
I would say, yeah, he'll do it.
Okay, I say he'll be right there as well. I think he's just ready.
Rangers
for
were
his
really
season.
trying to trade for him last year.
Yeah.
Because they saw the same exact thing.
Yep, the K per 9 keeps going up, and that ground ball rate is really good. All right. So, Anibal Sanchez. We've talked about him. Will he break the 200 inning mark? He's never done it. He's 30. This is his prime, his peak.
I think he does it.
Really, I would definitely take the under on the 200
Because he's pitched
innings.
195, 196, 195, 182. So he's been 5 innings short. And if he doesn't have that injury last year, he probably does it. So I think that he's becoming more of a contact pitcher as well as the strikeouts are going up. I think he's becoming more savvy. He reduced his hits last year by 44 and only two starts less. So I think this is a guy that we're truly seeing a Cliff Lee type
Leap.
leap.
Okay. Will he get 200 strikeouts?
Yes.
I agree with that.
I would not even be surprised if he was a Cy Young winner. I'm not putting him in that category yet.
You're going to think about that before we have the prediction podcast?
Yeah, but
He's on the list of potentials?
He's very much on the list. I'm very into Anibal Sanchez.
Okay. Max Scherzer. ERA over under 3.
Over.
Okay. I will agree with you, but it will be close for me.
So let's do something a little bit different. Let's do 3-4.
It would-
3-3.
3-4. I would have under 3-4.
Okay, I have... Ah, man. I'd say...
I would go under 3-3 as well.
Okay, so I'll take the over on 3-3.
Okay.
Okay.
Strikeouts. Over 230 for Scherzer.
Under. I think
Okay.
he's going to try and eat up a little bit more innings this year.
Okay. Justin Verlander. Just in general, does he bounce back to a is he a Cy Young top 3 guy? Is he regular Verlander again? Because I think
Yeah,
so.
without question.
I agree. I think that the defense will help, and I think he's actually going to be a little bit pissed off about what happened last season.
Yeah.
So I could easily see him having his best year ever.
Yeah. And he finally got that Lamborghini in after 2 years of ordering it, so...
Hey,
shit
being
like
with
that
Kate Upton
matters.
can't hurt.
Oh, no. Damn.
Miguel Cabrera, Kyle Smith, over under 40 home runs.
Over.
I take the under.
Okay.
Over under 130 RBIs. 130.
I'm gonna say... Well, Fielder batted after him, right?
Yes.
I'm gonna have to say, over.
I'm taking the under.
I think Kinsler is gonna be on base a lot.
I'm taking the under.
Okay.
And average 335.
It's so crazy that that's the over-under.
Yes.
for
And
Cabrera.
it's just saying, legit thing, because his last 344, 330, 348.
I'm gonna have to say under. Like, he's probably gonna hit 320.
I will say over.
Okay.
And then OPS, over 1,000. That's like,
Over.
yeah, for those of you who don't know, 1,000, if you're in 1,000 OPS, you're a legit MVP hitter. Without question.
Yeah.
And I will take the over with that, but I will think he'll miss more games this year, and that's why I have his counting stats lower.
Okay.
I feel like the injury, he'll play about 140 instead of 148 last
that
year.
might be planned, too.
I don't know about that.
maybe.
You never know, either way. And then the last one that I want to break out for the Detroit Tigers, we're going to talk about your boy, Ian Kinsler. Over under 270 batting average.
Over.
Okay.
He's not gonna have to bat lead off.
I will take the under.
Okay.
Over under. Will he bounce back and get over 20 home runs?
No. but he
Okay.
will have over 100 runs.
Okay, I agree with both of those.
Okay.
So, moving on from the Detroit Tigers, we're moving on to the Cleveland Indians. Unfortunately, this isn't the major leagues. There's no,
No
random players coming just to save them because, once again, as we mentioned with the good parallel, in my opinion, the Pittsburgh Pirates, their financial limitations hurt them in terms of sustaining what they've built and keeping their players. And specifically at the moment, I'm talking about Ubaldo Jimenez. Ubaldo's no ace, but what Ubaldo was very developed and started to really turn it around in the second half for Cleveland. They have a very good pitching coach, and I feel bad I don't know his name offhand, but he's really turned around a lot of these pitchers, really helped out Justin Masterson. He's worked really well with Zach McAllister, and he's going to continue to work well with Trevor Bauer, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if Bauer had a really good year as the fifth starter trying to replace Ubaldo. They have a lot of boomer bust players, I feel like, in terms of batting. Carlos Santana's one. Will Lonnie Chisenhall ever develop?
I don't think.
What are you going to get?
Boom bust.
In terms of the MVP hitter, he has the potential to be. That's kind of what I was referring to. Asdrubal Cabrera, is he ever going to repeat the year he had a couple years ago? Is that the real Michael Bourne now? Has age caught up with him? There's a lot of question marks with this team. Obviously, Terry Francona, very good manager, had an incredible year last year. But Kyle, looking at the lineup and what they need from a batting perspective to make up for their lack of elite starting pitching, what do you expect from them from a lineup standpoint in production?
I think that this is going to be a classic question of what happens with Cabrera. Does he get traded? And then you got to wonder, is Kipnis really going to continue his progression as their starting second baseman? I think he's always going to be a decent second baseman, but they're really kind of hoping / counting on him maybe becoming the guy.
I think he will become the guy. I don't mean to cut you off,
No,
but I am very sold on Jason Kipnis.
Yeah.
If you just look at his improvement from 2012 to 2013, his average went up 30 points, his on-base went up about 15, his slugging went way up by about 80 points, and he didn't even add that many home runs. He only went up 3, but what he did do is, even with his high strikeouts, he increased his walks a bit, his doubles went up by 14, and he really just started to solidify himself as, Cleveland's, Dustin Pedroia, Robinson Cano type in terms of having their best player be a second baseman, having the leader of their team be a second baseman. He is a top 5 second baseman in all of baseball, in my opinion, without question.
Wow. You heard it here, folks.
Well, you can't name 5 second basemen better than Kipnis right now. I'll put you to the challenge right now.
Robinson Cano.
1.
Dustin Pedroia.
2.
You're really putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
Let's see.
He's better than Kinsler.
Yeah, he probably is now. But
Yeah.
I don't even know if you know that.
No, he's better than Kinsler. Of
Of
course, I'm the guy that thinks he's the top 5, but still, I mean, you can look at the stats, and if you just look at the stats, it says Kinsler's better. I mean, Kipnis is better. Well, I'm kind of making my argument seem worse by misspeaking.
No, that's okay. I don't know. That's.
I
tough,
mean, Chase Utley's not on that level anymore to, kind of think about this more. Matt Carpenter's third base now. He's someone that I would put on Kipnis' level, but now he's at third, so he doesn't count.
Yeah, no, but you say Colton Wong's gonna.
Colton Wong is definitely not ready for that
Not
spot.
close.
I mean, second base.
Profar's not ready for it.
Profar, who knows if his shoulder's going to work enough for him to be a
Although
second
he's been
baseman.
a monster in spring training.
Yeah, so is Dustin Ackley, who, in my opinion, I thought was going to be a Kipnis type.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get on that rant.
But yeah, maybe he is top 5. We'll have to revisit that. I don't even know if he's as good as Infante. So
What?
I mean, he's never batted 300. So
So? Wow.
I'm just
I
saying.
can't believe you think Infante is better than Kipnis.
Well, I mean, you're talking about a guy who's played 2 years.
Who's 26? Of course he's played 2 years.
26. That's not 21. That's not 22. It's not 23. It's 26.
Just because you're a late developer doesn't mean that you can hold it against him when he's proven 2 straight years that he's developed and continued to got better.
Okay, well, I had him in fantasy 2 years ago, and he destroyed the first half of the season and was absolute freaking garbage. The
Okay.
rest of the way.
And now are we going to ignore his development in 2013?
No, I don't think we can ignore it, but I mean, I don't know if we're really going to say he was that much better. He struck out 143 times, which is not good.
How many times Kinsler strike out?
I think I just closed that page, to be honest with you.
Well, I'll give you time to look that up, but in terms of Kipnis's development and his jump, basically year 2 to year 3 when he was the starter, how good can this lineup be if Lonnie Chisenhall ever makes that leap that everyone has expected out of him since he was a big-time prospect?
I think that their lineup will be insanely good, and to be honest with you, I think they might be insanely good even without him.
Really?
Yeah, I really like Brantley. He's batted .280 with plus 350 OBP.
He's a
last
very,
2
very
years.
solid player. They just signed him to a very team-friendly extension.
Yeah, super good outfielder.
For instance, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it was about 5-25 for Brantley, and then Brett Gardner got 4-52.
Jeez, yeah, I'd much
Who would you rather have?
Brantley, without question.
I would rather have Brantley if the money was even.
Yeah.
But it's not even. There's a double difference. So, Brantley, very good contract, Cleveland. Congrats on that. Mark Shapiro, the president of baseball operations in the Cleveland Indians.
I think that David Murphy was total steal, coming off one of the worst years in his career.
One of the worst years in baseball as a batter last year.
Yeah, I mean, the Mendoza line was definitely applicable. Michael Bourne.
Down year.
Down year, but look at the stats. He's had a 350 OBP, a 3.36 OBP.
Yeah. Even if you think the wheels are gone and he's not getting 40 steals ever, that OBP shouldn't have dropped 30 points.
No.
So I feel like he'll bounce back a bit.
He's got to bounce back. And Swisher.
They need him to.
Swisher may not be. I've never been a huge Swisher fan, but the fact is he's still a tough out.
He's still getting on base.
Yeah,
Like, it was
he's
down
totally-
last year, but his career is 358 on base.
Yeah,
That's
he's a
good.
tough at-bat. And so what you've got here is a bunch of guys that are really good at getting on base. Not necessarily a bunch of great RBI machines, which could be a little bit of a problem, but I think that a lot of these guys are going to hit because they have great coaching. And, I think their pitching staff's somewhat of a weak point, but we really don't know how well Trevor Bauer is going to perform.
Some of their pitchers definitely have potential to be very good.
Yeah.
Trevor Bauer's one of them. Will Zach McAllister continue to develop? He is 26, but he has improved 3 straight years with Cleveland in the majors. Justin Masterson has really continued to develop, had a very good year last year. I don't think he's ever going to be a true ace, obviously. There were, thoughts about that when he first came up with Boston, but he's definitely developed into even a really good 3-starter on a good rotation, and he can definitely be that workhorse for Cleveland. But the guy I'm really intrigued by, and a lot of people are intrigued by, is Danny Salazar. Kyle, have you had any chance to look over Salazar and what he's been able to look like? He's a big-time fastball, crazy good slider, 24. They have really high hopes for him to replace Ubaldo.
I'm definitely thinking that's why they let Ubaldo go.
Yeah.
But
Besides
Salazar, at
money,
the same
of course.
time, you don't know if he's going to really you're going to get that production this year.
Yeah, is he, quote-unquote, ready to be that full-time starter they need?
Yeah, I don't really know that. I haven't seen him pitch more than once, if I can even say that. I don't remember seeing him pitch last year, so I couldn't really say.
He has a very good, brings a lot to the table from a stuff perspective, but I'm also very concerned that they're putting too much on his plate from just giving him that starter spot, really counting on him to be, the potential guy that jumps up and becomes a number 2, a number 1, because it's looking very unlikely that they'll be able to extend Masterson. And then you expect Salazar to be your best pitcher, and then the guy with the most talent, Trevor Bauer, hasn't found a consistent release point in 3 years. I mean, the pitching is definitely the issue with this team. Would you agree, Kyle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But thank God, they have a great pitching coach.
Yes.
So that should rectify that. Going back to our second base conversation, we totally forgot about Aaron Hill.
Yeah, but he's not better than Kipnis, and he's coming off an injury-plagued season as well, though.
Yeah.
Because if you want to bring
Didn't
to
he bat
fantasy, I had him in
340
fantasy
years ago?
last year. Yes, he did. He's a very good hitter.
Yeah.
But he also is coming off an injury-plagued year, and he's over 30, I believe.
And Zobrist, of course.
Yeah, Zobrist plays wherever, but I do love Zobrist.
Yeah.
So.
The only other one was Brandon Phillips.
Yeah, and we talked about his really bad on-base percentage.
Can't count on his production. I'd almost rather bet on Kipnis at this point.
Yeah.
Oh, Jose Altuve, though.
Jose Altuve's interesting. That's another low on-base guy, but is very productive with hits and steals, and a very fun player to watch.
Yeah, very fun.
So,
he's so small.
Cleveland they kind of remind me of the Reds before they got the pitching lockdown, where they had a lot of really great batting and really questionable pitching when Cueto was first coming up, and then when Bailey was first coming up before he developed more and before they got Latos. And I feel like this is a team that could score a lot of runs, but they'll lose a lot of games, like 6-8, 7-10, 4-5. There's not going to be too many one-run games in Cleveland. I don't feel like
No.
They picked up John Axford to be the closer. He found something with his delivery in St. Louis that fixed, his results, and hopefully that continues for him. We don't ever want to see a player just fall off a cliff like that, but at the same time, I expect his results to be mixed, and I expect Brian Shaw to get the closer role. So for you fantasy listeners out there, that's a guy to keep your eye on, in my opinion. Kyle, anything else you would like to talk about for the Cleveland Indians before we do over-unders?
I just think that, I'm really looking forward to the deadline with them. I think that they're a very interesting team.
Completely agree.
Can't wait to see what they get in return for Cabrera, if it's a top-line starter, and also...
Could he go to the Yankees if Jeter gets hurt and they're trying to win again? I mean...
Very likely.
I don't
think they have
would
the
they
prospects
want
that Cleveland wants, but...
Yeah, they don't have that many ready guys. I mean, if you believe in Yan Gomes, you probably don't want your main piece to be Gary Sanchez. And... the rest,
which
a lot
they
of
clearly do.
yeah,
So.
and then with the Yankees, a lot of their prospects, some of the more interesting ones are high upside, high risk outfielders like Mason Williams and Slade Heathcott, and I don't know if they want to wait a couple years for those two guys to be ready. So
yeah, no, that'll be interesting, and that obviously brings up Lindor. So hopefully hopefully he has an exciting.
Time in the minors.
Yeah, exciting second half because.
Yeah, I feel like he will be if they're
really
trading
high
Cabrera.
prospect.
The main reasons to get Lindor time, I feel like, because they draft very well, and they would probably like to have those Cabrera picks, because unlike a lot of the other players who got denied arbitration, you've kind of seen that where like Morales should have accepted, Cruz should have accepted. In hindsight, of course, they should have, but that didn't stop the Yankees from getting Ellsbury. That didn't stop the Mariners from going from Cano, and Cabrera is a lot better player than Cruz and Morales, especially factoring in defense and his position. And I feel like
do you think the Mets are a fit for him?
Absolutely. I feel like they would sign him before Drew because he's younger, much better hitter, and better defensively at this point right now.
But would they
trade for him?
Yeah.
No, because I don't think they're close enough to winning to lose those young
agree.
prospects.
I agree.
So.
Even though they have a ton of right-handed power arms, but still.
Yeah. Anywho, ready for some over-unders?
Yep.
All right. So I want to give you just a stat on Salazar before I give you a Salazar over-under. So obviously we both expect him to be just pretty much given a rotation spot.
Yeah, I don't see why.
So in 60 innings in the majors and 10 starts in 52 innings, he had an 11.25 K9.
Jeez.
So
only 15 walks.
Yeah, so over under 200 strikeouts for Salazar.
Under just because it's too early, but
okay.
But
I could see about $185, $190, like super close to it.
Yeah.
But he definitely has the stuff to do.
Especially if the innings are there, but
yeah.
Geez,
I'm worried about the innings. So. Yeah. Carlos Santana, over under 20 games started at third base. For those of you who don't know, they're trying out Santana at third, even though he weighs like 220.
I'm gonna say over.
Okay.
I feel like the Cleveland Indians know what they're doing when it comes to that kind of stuff. So
I agree.
At least he'll get that if they see it.
Over under 25 home runs with Santana.
Over. I think the catching thing is something you cannot quantify. When you don't have to catch, it's a lot off your mind.
It'll save a lot of your leg energy too, and your core. And I'll talk about this a lot and extensively for Mauer, because who's moving to first base for Minnesota? Because there's not much to talk about for Minnesota, kind of like the Cubs. But I think it will help Santana as well in the power department.
Definitely.
As Drupal Cabrera, over under June 1st when he gets traded. Does he get traded before June 1st or after June 1st? The trade deadline is end of July. So you think he's moved very early to maximize value?
Yeah. Okay. I think that's kind of if he gets traded. Otherwise, I think they're definitely looking forward to the first round pick.
I agree.
So they're the team that drafts well, and they're kind of built to be around for a while. So Kipnis is really young, Santana's really young. are still pretty young. Salazar, Masterson, they're just got
Bauer.
they got a lot of guys that could be around for a long
Yeah,
time. There's
I
no
agree.
reason to rush, even though they're already winning.
Yep.
So
Michael Bourne over under 40 steals.
I'm gonna say under. I think that he's just gonna try and get on base and improve that part of his game. I just think that they don't really need him to be that aggressive on the bags. I think if anybody's gonna steal a bunch of bases, it'll probably be Kipnis. So
I agree. I would take the under on 30 as well. And I also think we could see a few more attempts for Michael Brantley.
Yeah.
Yep. I think
see that
he's
too.
he'll improve a little bit more. Jason Kipnis. Let's just do some over-unders for him. Over under 20 home runs.
I'm gonna say under. I don't really know if he's got that power. He's
Right.
a smaller guy.
He had
so
17 last year. I will take the over, but by over I mean
21.
21. Yeah. Over under 30 steals. He's gone back to back 30
I think
steals.
he'll be over. I think that they need him to steal those bases.
I agree, but I think that he could do it, but I think he'll be under, and I think the increase in power will be because a factor with that.
I like that.
And over under 280 on average.
I think it's going to be under. I think last year was a little bit better than he's projected. I think he strikes out too much and doesn't walk enough. So, we'll see how that translates. I could be wrong,
Right.
obviously. But
I feel like 280 is a very good over under, and I would take the under, but I think he's above 270.
yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah,
I still
it's
think
close.
he's going to be above 265, 270, or at least in that range. And that's fine because he still gets on base a lot. So,
Yep.
it's whatever.
Justin Masterson, over under 3.5 ERA.
I think he's going to go under. I
Really?
was impressed watching him last year. He just has good location.
Yeah.
And he has a funky delivery that's hard
Yeah.
to catch on to.
And if you look, as we've talked about, their pitching coach, I feel like this is another example of it. In 2012, 6.49 K per 9. In 2013, over 9. That's a very good jump for someone that was always thought of as a ground ball pitcher since he's been in Cleveland. And I would take the over on the ERA, but I think that he will have a very good year.
No, I think he's kind of figured it out. So
And then the last one, I want to do a few on this guy because he's for any hardcore baseball fan that follows prospects and, the draft and things of this nature, he's a very interesting player to always talk about. You always get a lot of strong opinions on him. Kyle Smith, Trevor Bauer. Over under 100 innings pitched for the Indians this year.
I think it's got to be over.
I agree.
I think they need him, and I think that he got called up 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So he got called up last year. So I think that he just needs to continue to master his location and stop the long pitching.
Stop walking people.
Yeah.
It's an issue.
Nitpicking all the time.
All right, so we're going to move over to a team that we both agree will be the Pittsburgh Pirates of this season in terms of breaking that playoff drought. We're both very big fans of everything they've done for the most part, and that's the Kansas City Royals. In the offseason, they certainly made some interesting moves that were kind of out of their norm. They paid some money, spent some money. They signed Jason Vargas to be kind of that reliable 3-2 starter that can eat up a lot of innings.
The drunken boxer.
Yeah. They traded for Naoki Aoki from the Milwaukee Brewers, and a move I really liked because even if it was the actor Will Smith, who's also fallen off incredibly hard, the pitcher Will Smith is also not worth Aoki. And they also spent money to solve the black hole at second base, and they signed Omar Infante from the division rivals of the Detroit Tigers. That's always something interesting fans like to talk about, is when you sign your rivals player.
Seen all the pictures.
Exactly. So the Royals have a very interesting, very young team. A lot of batters who could have breakout years or continue their, surprising decline. So Kyle Smith, what do you think about the Royals batting?
Before I really launch into the Royals, I just want to say one last thing on Cleveland, which is if Trevor Bauer starts lighting it up, I want to see some Bauer outage T-shirts. That's way too cool of a nickname to let that go. That being said,
I always wanted Smoke Bomb T-shirts, but too bad he ain't good enough.
Right, but I just think that's a really cool nickname for a pitcher. Even if he just becomes like a closer, that'd be the coolest nickname, like Bauer outage.
With his crazy stuff, that is something that he can fall back on.
Oh, he could be Rosenthal easily.
I don't know about Rosenthal, but There's been so many closers that used to be stars. Just look at your own division. Joe Nathan had 14 starts with the San Francisco Giants in 1999.
Yeah.
3 years later, he was an elite closer for Minnesota.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep your eye on.
I really like this Kansas City lineup. I like Alex Gordon, really athletic, good fielder.
Incredible fielder.
He's got power, pretty much the weaker version of what Will Myers was last year. Will Myers developed immediately.
I don't know if Will Myers will never be defensively what Alex Gordon is now. But Alex Gordon will also probably never have the power that Myers is going to have. So.
Yeah, but I guess you'd rather have the hitting, personally. But still, I just feel like Alex Gordon was supposed to be Will Myers when he got called up.
Well, Alex Gordon was supposed to be
Yeah.
George Brett. Because he was the number 1 pick. He was a third baseman, reminded a lot of people of George Brett defensively and offensively. And he couldn't hit or field. And then he got called up early, and then he didn't work out, and then he went to the minors, and then he became an outfielder. Then all of a sudden in 2011, he's 300, 370, 500 with a 7.1 WAR, and he's become one of the best left fielders defensively in baseball. Him and Jason Hayward, I believe, like to have a game where they're like, hey, who wants to have the most outfield assists this year? He has a cannon in left field, and it's really strange to have that in left field as opposed to right field as well. And it's really strange to have all those assists coming from left, because usually, you think of outfield arms with really good arms, they're in right field. A lot of times. Ichiro, Vladimir Guerrero, they have cannons, but they're in right field. So it's really strange for third base coaches to realize, that Alex Gordon is in there in left instead of right. So it's something always to think about Alex Gordon, how he's just a very interesting story. If you want to care about baseball and very interested in these, failed prospects who then reimagine themselves as different player, like Josh Hamilton, although he had a different story. Alex Gordon's an interesting story to read.
Yeah, no, I definitely expect him to have a good year. 2 and 3 years ago, he posted back-to-back 3.36 OBP. That's really, really good for a guy who could hit 25 home runs. Hasn't yet, but could. He's got the frame for it. As we mentioned earlier, they trade raped Milwaukee for Aoki. Nobody in baseball understands this trade. I still honestly lie awake at night thinking about how bad that trade was. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't see what the Brewers saw in Aoki, but back-to-back 285 batting averages is definitely somebody I want in my right field for practically nothing.
His on base is very good too. He's a very underrated player.
Yeah.
He's just solid.
He's only been in the league 2 years, right?
Yeah, he's an import from Japan.
Yeah, but he's just one of those
He's
guys.
a very solid player. Good job Milwaukee getting a very good contract for him. Bad job Milwaukee for trading him for Will Smith.
Yeah.
Very bad lawn reliever.
Yeah, no, I'm not really that into it. But I like what they got out of Escobar last year. I think Moustakas is always kind of like that wild card player.
Well, speaking of Moustakas and Escobar, they both had worse years in 2012 than they did in 2013 than they did in 2012. Moustakas especially, his on base was 287 last year. His slugging dropped 60 points. He's supposed to be a power hitting third baseman. He's supposed to be a key cog along with Eric Hosmer, who's finally shown very good development last year. And he's not. He just regressed horribly. And then if you look at Escobar, who's a very speedy, very good defensively shortstop, and you look at his numbers, 2013 on base 331, 2013 ended up being 259. So his on base dropped 70 points from 2012 to 2013. So if those two can figure it out, this lineup can be really good.
Yeah, I think Hosmer's finally figured it out.
I agree completely.
I just think that he should have had it figured out last year.
Yes.
Or 2 years ago, excuse me. But the fact was he didn't, because he had the same walks and same strikeouts last year as he did the year before when he struggled. But he's just a lot better at making contact.
A lot better contact.
And we've all known that 6'4", 220. The guy's prototypical. He could hit 30 home runs. I mean, he's never shown that yet, but I think it's totally within the realm of possibility for him. Billy Butler, very disciplined hitter, a little overrated because he kind of has one of those NASCAR names, but but Salvador Perez, this guy's 23 years old, and he's one of the most elite catchers already.
He has maybe the best contract in baseball.
Probably.
He's already extended for 7 years at $3.5 million a year flat.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Considering how good he could be.
Great job getting on top of that extension before he had another great year. It cost at least double that.
Yeah. So I really like their hitting. I think it's a little bit contingent on progression, development.
Yes.
But at the same time, a lot of these guys that you're wondering about progression, development, have already shown that they're capable. So it's kind of nice knowing that in the back of your head, these guys are only a year or two out from a really good year, or at least a pretty solid year. You know, Moustakas, Gordon,
Right.
Kane is probably always going to be average at the plate, but he's good in centers, so that's fine.
They have good outfield depth with Kane, Dyson, and Maxwell, who can all kind of platoon and be defensive replacements for Aoki, for instance, who's not a great defender compared to the other three. So they can kind of platoon there. And before we talk about the kind of so-so starters and incredible bullpen that Kansas City has, Kyle, do you think Hosmer still has MVP potential? Because I do. 100% think he could be a future MVP still.
A future MVP, yes.
And I'm not saying this year.
Yeah, maybe not this year,
Yeah.
but yeah, I could see it.
I still think he could hit 30 homers. I still think that he's Joey Votto, who will hit more power and have less on-base percentage. I always felt that was a very solid comparison.
That's a hard comparison because, you know, Votto's like
He's
god
very unique.
of OBP.
Yeah,
like,
he's like Euclid on steroids.
Yeah,
And I'm not
he's-
saying Euclid has ever taken steroids.
Right, yeah, let's clear that up for all you
It-
people that freak
obviously,
out
if you
over
know
that shit.
Euclid knows that he does not look like he ever took steroids.
Right, unless they randomly threw it in a beer or fried
Yeah.
chicken.
Yeah.
But I really like this lineup. It's contingent on obviously the progression. But
Yeah.
what's really going to save this team is their pitching depth. Their starting pitching doesn't blow you away, but they're all pretty decent.
And there's definitely some potential. I would just really want to take a second to talk about Danny Duffy.
Yeah.
Danny Duffy is the guy that came up in 2011 and showed some promise, especially moving into 2012, and then he had a very nasty elbow injury. But he came back last year and showed he still had incredible stuff. And I feel like at 25, he's going to be on an innings limit, but he's still going to be able to go 180, 200, and he's going to be a guy that they really need to count on to kind of step up and be right under James Shields and someone that, you know, potentially from a stuff standpoint can match what Detroit's bringing at the top of the rotation.
Yeah, possibly. You know, they need Ventura to get up this year. He came up last year.
Showed
Was
some
pretty
great promise.
solid. Had a great fastball, easily hitting 100, which is really crazy considering his frame. Kyle
Yeah.
Zimmer got shut down last year with shoulder soreness, so hopefully we see him at some point.
He has
in the
lots of
second
potential
half.
too.
Yeah,
He's a
lots of
potential number 2, maybe fringe number 1 with the stuff he has.
Yeah, and besides that, they don't have a lot they could call up this year. Raul Mondesi is their shortstop. I don't really see him getting to the majors.
I feel like he's 2 years away, but it does give them flexibility in the future to be like, Escobar, you haven't developed. We're not going to extend you. We're not going to worry about it. We're going to give Mondesi this opportunity.
Yeah.
James Shields, he gave them exactly what they needed last year. Obviously, you
No.
can talk about if it was right to trade, you know, the future of your outfield potentially in Will Myers, but you know, if you really want to win that bad, it wasn't that bad of a move in terms of just production. James Shields had a very, very good year, Kyle. You want to talk about how much we both really like James Shields?
There's not a pitcher in baseball that has the stuff that he has that is able to hit the locations he can hit. I mean, he's got worse stuff than Cliff Lee, but the exact same location.
When he's on, he's just really good. And he is an absolute workhorse. I mean, talk about the innings he's hit.
Yeah, he's just incredible. Like, I mean, there's really not enough you could say about him. He's just he gets contacts, strikeouts, paints corners. I really hope that he likes Kansas City and decides to stay because he's only pitched for one other team in his career, and it was a small market team as well. And hopefully he has a heart for that type of stuff because he could really, if he stays next year, I think Kansas City has a tremendous chance to continue to be a perennial playoff contender.
Absolutely.
Ventura hopefully starts out in the pen for them. I don't know if he's going to ever be a starter just because of his small frame, but he eventually probably could give you some starts.
You know, I really like Ventura, and I would really just do everything I can to make him and, you know, other players we've talked about, like Marcus Stroman, give them every opportunity they can to start if they want to.
Yeah.
And
Would you do it risking losing him, though, this year?
yes.
If Guthrie and Chen are okay.
Guthrie and Chen, they're okay. Vargas, who they signed in the offseason,
pretty
will
decent
eat a lot of innings. So will Guthrie, will eat a ton of innings. Obviously, James Shield will eat innings as like a monster. He almost hit 250 in 2011. And, with those kind of guys that you're going to get, 4 or 5 starter stuff from a couple of them, but they're going to be there every 5th day, it allows you to take chances and, work up Ventura as a starter in AAA or Duffy in AAA to make sure that they get the time they need. But Kyle, let's talk about this bullpen that's just loaded with guys that can throw 96, 97, crazy movement. Greg Holland ascended to the closer role, had a massively successful year last year with a 0.87 whip, over 100 strikeouts, 47 saves. Failed number 1 pitching prospect, Luke Horvichor, went full-time bullpen last year and had an incredible year as well. 1.92 ERA, 0.87 whip, 82 strikeouts. Kelvin Herrera, his ERA is not as good, walks a few guys, but he can throw 100 and strike out big-time amounts with 74.
It's only 24.
Exactly. Aaron Crow, very solid reliever, who was actually
strikeout fucking animal.
Who was actually better in 2012, but his K per 9's always around 9 and 10. And then you also have Tim Collins, who's as wild and as erratic as anyone, but his K9 in 2012 was 12. Last year was 9. So they're basically just loaded with relievers that can strike out any batter anytime. They're not worried about putting any of these guys against the heart of the Tigers lineup or the Yankees because they know they can strike out anyone.
Yeah, and that gives you a lot of flexibility in the fact that you have inning eaters that don't have elite stuff. Because you've seen it with every hitter will tell you their success rate when they've seen a pitcher that third time is so much higher. So all of a sudden you have guys, instead of Vargas, Guthrie, and Chen, and Duffy needing to go 7 innings all the time, they could go 6. I mean, legit. I mean,
Yeah.
you could throw in Crow, Herrera, Collins, Hovichar.
I mean,
if you bring in Ventura as a long reliever, you could seriously pitch these guys 6 innings.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
It's not something you want to make a habit of if they're doing well, but I mean...
If Vargas, goes into that 7th inning and, walks Cabrera, then gives up a single to Victor Martinez perhaps, and then you have, Ian Kinsler coming up at the 5th spot if he's batting 5th, and then you're like, whoa, Vargas, you're starting to lose it.
Yeah.
Let's bring in Kelvin Herrera, who's going to start throwing 99 instead of your fastball that sits 89.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, that's a very big difference.
And nobody's seen that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a very good point.
Because none of their guys throw very fast.
No, even Shields runs in from a starter runs at 92, 93.
Yeah.
Duffy hits 94, 95, but he's trying to tone it back because of the injury. And Ventura can hit 96, 97. But with his size and frame and starting, he's probably going to sit 94 or 95 as well.
Yeah, so I really think that I am usually not a big proponent of, like, bullpens win games. I just think that there's way more important things than that. But that being said, their bullpen is so elite that I truly think that that's one of the things that separates them as a team is that they have solid hitting, solid starting pitching, and just some of the most lights out relief pitching in baseball. Probably the best pen in baseball.
I was just going to ask you, in my opinion,
them or
best,
the Braves.
In my opinion, best bullpen in baseball.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think the Braves are second. I'd probably go Oakland second. Oakland's is really good with all those moves they made. Because the Braves, you got to remember, they lost Flaherty.
Yeah.
Kimbrel's obviously there, and
but Ventura, I think, will bounce back big time.
He could, and then, but it's just this bullpen's incredible. So let's move on to some over-unders. So for the Kansas City Royals, over-under 2 relievers with over 80 strikeouts.
Over.
3 relievers with 80 strikeouts.
Over.
4 relievers with 80
Under.
strikeouts.
I gotta say on that. But I definitely think Crow, Holland, and I don't know if it's gonna be Collins or
Horford or Herrera.
But it could be any of them.
I completely agree.
Especially with how much they might go to the pen.
Yeah. All right, James Shields, over under 200 strikeouts.
I'm gonna say under. I don't know. Is that really his forte?
2011, 225, 2012, 223, last year 196.
Jeez, he strikes a lot more than I would have thought.
Well, he also goes so many innings.
Yeah,
it
that's
helps.
true.
And I would take the over, and I think this will be James Shields' one of his best years. I think that he's going to put it all together and challenge for a Cy Young and help lead Kansas City to the playoffs, as I'm predicting, and I believe Kyle also will predict them as a wild card, or at least definitely in the running.
Yeah, they won 86 games last year, and they almost made the playoffs towards the end of the year. They just had too much competition because Cleveland came out of nowhere.
Yeah. Eric Hosmer, over under 25 home runs.
Over.
I agree 100%.
He has made the switch.
Yep. And one more, Alex Gordon, over under 25 home runs.
Under, but I really think he's going to get back on base.
I will take the over, and I think we'll get back on base as well. I think he will have another 7 WAR type season.
Jeez, that would be incredible.
Yes, it would. So, moving on to two of the, definitely there's a big gap here in between Detroit, Kansas City, and then Cleveland, and then there's an even bigger gap between Cleveland and the White Sox.
Yeah.
The White Sox are interesting. They've made a lot of moves over the last 2 years to try to rebuild this lineup, try to get it a lot younger. Konerko re-signed to have kind of his farewell campaign. One host here really wishes he would have been on a more winning team that would have had a chance to get him another ring.
Yeah.
Another host here is maybe the biggest fan of Chris Sale around. There's definitely some interesting things going on. I'm a big fan of Jose Abreu. I think he could easily have 35 home runs this season. I think he's ready for the big show. But just the White Sox, they're definitely on that lower tier, and I don't think they have any shot to contend, Kyle.
Yeah, I don't think they have a shot to contend. I was a little bit surprised by some of their moves. I like the Addison Reed trade just because I don't think you really need an elite closer.
And he wasn't elite anyway, in my
Well,
opinion.
he was getting there though. He was pretty consistent over 2 years.
We'll talk about him in the next show because that's
But-
where the Diamondbacks
But
are.
I'm just saying, like, he had a chance. He has a chance, especially because he keeps his pitches down, which is really valuable. But I like that trade. I feel like their GM is kind of treating them as though the playoff berth 2 years ago was like a sign of things to come, whereas
I feel like they made that mistake last year, but going into this year, I think they realized that they're just really bad.
yeah, I think they realize that too. But at the same time, I think that they're also counting on Abreu and Davidson to really bring that thump that they didn't have the year before. I think they're really counting on Adam Eaton, who I don't really believe should be playing center field, but apparently he is.
He feels like a left fielder to me.
Yeah, he just, I don't...
Doesn't have that good of an arm, doesn't have crazy speed. Like, he's solid speed, solid range. He's probably makes very good reads, but someone I'd rather have in left so you can have that super rangy guy in center, like a Diaza.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's also getting older, and I was very surprised they didn't trade him this offseason, to be honest.
Yeah, I kind of thought he was a prime candidate to get moved. But yeah, I mean, they still got... They've got some interesting pieces. Diane Viciedo had a good year 2 years ago, really struggled last year. So they're kind of like one of those teams where they're in this transition period of they don't really know what they have on their roster or how well they're going to perform. They've got Felipe Paulino as a pitcher who's been wildly inconsistent and never really started very much. Alexi Ramirez, sorry. Kind of just a fringe shortstop. He's not really much above or below replacement level. Keppinger is supposed to be their main utility guy, which doesn't really inspire a lot of faith in me. Hopefully Gordon Beckham makes a step forward, but
That's never going to happen.
Yeah, I wouldn't really count on
Former
that.
failed first round pick.
Tyler Flowers is their catcher, and
He's no AJ Pierzynski.
For any White Sox fan who just heard Tyler Flowers and jumped off a bridge, I'm really sorry. Honestly, that was not my intention. Jose Quintana, I know I'm kind of just running all over the place on their lineup right now, but
I like Quintana. I really, really, really like Quintana, to be honest.
He's all right.
He's a very solid 3-starter to me if he reaches his potential.
Yeah, I agree with you.
He had a very good year last year. Very good.
Yeah, and he had a good year the year before.
He had 200 innings last year. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
He kept the walks down too. Pretty good pitcher. I don't really know.
Well, he doesn't have elite stuff. I mean, he's probably.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to talk about great pitching coaches. Chicago White Sox definitely have one.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
just
as far as just keeping guys healthy.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I'd like to jump in here, and then since Kyle just went all over the place, well, I'll just go all over the place too. We'll just freelance this White Sox one because it's kind of just a clusterfuck anyway. I feel bad for John Danks, who was a very solid pitcher, 08, 09, 010, and then just got his career completely derailed by injuries. Kind of feel bad about that. I mean, he had some very good years there, especially in 2008.
Yeah, he was definitely on the up and up. They still got him done, right?
Yeah, they still had him done, and once again, you're making more White Sox fans jump off bridges.
But he walks.
Adam Dunn, he's always been a fun player to watch. I mean, he's super huge. It looks like a tight end in the NFL. Makes tons of money, hits tons of homers, tons of walks, tons of strikeouts. This is the last year of his deal. I mean, there was rumors he was going to retire before this season. This is probably going to be his last year in baseball. So let's all just embrace the Adam Dunn, one of the first.
Same with Konerko.
Yeah, one of the first truest three true outcome hitters around, where he strikeout, walk, homer. And then Paul Konerko, not a Hall of Famer to me, but an extremely good player. And he's been the heart and soul of the Chicago White Sox team for a very long time. They won a title with him. Very good hitter. Kyle's been a big fan for a very long time. He has a lot of good counting numbers, been playing for a very long time. Doesn't have the just standout elite numbers you expect or see from a Hall of Famer, but without question, a very good player.
Yeah. Are we going to talk about the most exciting thing about this team, or are we saving that kind of as like the main dish?
I'm getting there. Adam Eaton, whatever. Jose Abreu. Kyle, what do you expect from him? 35 home runs. Is he hitting it over under?
Over.
I agree.
I think. Well, I'm not going to say over this year. I think he's obviously
over under 30. I would take the over on 30 for sure.
Yeah, I take the over on 30.
That ballpark helps too.
Yeah, but they've done some interesting things. I think that they've really put themselves in position to be to make the playoffs next year. I know it sounds kind of weird to look at. Well, I'm just saying if Cleveland takes a step back, and Kansas City can't bring back Shields, and they start having injuries,
right,
and Duffy doesn't pan out.
I mean, it's possible. Detroit could get old. Those hitters could really get old.
I mean, Kinsler could be injury prone. Cabrera could be.
I mean,
I'm just.
I don't see it at all, but it's definitely not a complete 100% not possible. But there's just two pitchers I want to talk about. Two of their most exciting pitchers. Eric Johnson, first round pick of theirs in the past. Came up last year at the end, showed solid stuff. His whip, he's got to get those walks under control, but he's going to have a starting spot from the get-go, and he's a potential Rookie of the Year candidate because he's going to have a starting spot the entire year. I would expect him to have an ERA under 4. His whip should be around 1.3, not perfect, but he's going to be a solid guy, and then it just seems like whenever starting pitchers get up to the majors with that pitching coach, Rick Hahn, I think is his name actually, they just get better. And speaking of just getting better, Chris Sale. Kyle Smith, would you like to start talking about Chris Sale first so I don't have to?
What? I mean, this guy's just an incredible pitcher. He's got one of the funkiest deliveries in baseball. Well, not really.
That's
in baseball.
One of the biggest negatives.
It's a little bit more unconventional.
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest negatives about Chris Sale coming out of Florida Gulf Coast, coming into the draft, going up as a prospect, as a first rounder. It's why he fell a little bit in the draft. His delivery, mechanics aren't perfect. There's always been concerns about injuries, but 2012, 192 innings, 2013, 214 innings. This guy is just a monster. He had 226 strikeouts last year. Far and away the best player in this team. Like, there's a gap, and then a mountain, and then another gap, and then a ladder, and then a step stool, and then probably Jose Abreu. Or Jose Quintana, I guess. But
hopefully Abreu can get there. But, yeah, this is a guy who pitched 215 innings and only 30 starts. If he has those extra 3 starts, he's probably over
230. Strikeouts are probably at 240, 245. The issue with him, like, he was a legit Cy Young contender, had the highest WAR in the American League as a pitcher, higher than Darvish, higher than Hernandez. I think he might have been tied with Kershaw as well. So, I mean, he's really good. And
strikeouts,
if his team was better, he had higher wins, he probably could have won the Cy Young last year.
I think he probably would.
He was better than Scherzer last year, in my opinion. In my opinion, he was right there with Darvish for best pitcher in the American League last year.
Yeah, he's an incredible pitcher. It kind of sucks to see a guy who we're all scared about the injury thing, potentially wasting his prime on a team like this, but that's just what happens in sports. Like, There's really nothing you can do about it. All you got to do is hope that maybe he takes a little bit off the fastball, suffers in ERA for a couple years to save his arm, and then balls out later for some other team. Or maybe he can just continue this immense amount of success. But
before we move on to Minnesota and the lack of interesting things to talk about with them, the last thing I'd like to touch on is just not over-under. There's not much to talk about over-under-wise for the White Sox. Is Chris Sale the new Felix Hernandez in terms of absolute dominance with a horrible team, and it's going to hold him back in terms of just the counting numbers for wins, for 300 wins, for Cy Youngs, things like that? Can you see him in the next 3-4 years having absolute dominant years and no one really talking about it because of how bad his team is?
Certainly.
Okay.
I could see that. I mean, obviously not as pitchers they don't compare, but
right.
I
I'm
see
just
the
saying
role.
from
Yeah.
Their stance on the team and their place in baseball in terms of talent.
Yeah, no, I think
production.
now that you guys have Cano, he's officially taken that spot, probably.
Well,
I mean,
you're assuming we're going to be good.
Well, you're going to be better. You probably win 80 games.
Oh, that's sweet.
Hey, that's better than whatever it was last year, 60 or 62.
It was not 62. Were you kidding me?
How many did you win last year?
That means you have 100 losses. It was like 74 wins, I think, last year.
That's good.
All right, well, Chicago, they have no shot to win the division. And speaking of teams with absolutely no shot at all to win this division, the Minnesota Twins. For some reason, they wanted to sign a couple pitchers this offseason. They signed Ricky Nolasco. They signed Phil Hughes to multi-year deals. Phil Hughes, I thought, was an overpay based off his production, but I think he's actually going to have a better year this year just because he's out of New York. Nolasco's contract is fair, but I have no idea why they signed a 31-year-old to a 4-year deal.
I like that deal.
The most interesting thing about this team is its prospects, and speaking of prospects, I just want to say I feel bad about Miguel Sano, a top 5 prospect, their second best prospect, having an injury and having to have Tommy John surgery. It's very rare to see a position player need Tommy John, and as a third base prospect, I expect him probably to get moved to first or the outfield. So he had legit light tower power, 35 home run potential, and at third base could have been extremely valuable.
I would like to see him and Joey Gallo arm wrestle.
Well, now that he's injured, it may not be fair. How about Jose Abreu and Joey Gallo? That'd be fun. But
I don't think he could beat Abreu, though. Abreu's big.
Well, you just shorter your arms, kind of like bench press. It helps you more.
That's true.
Aaron Hicks was a big-time center field prospect that they've been developing. Came up last year, was absolutely dreadful. Hopefully he turns it around. Joe Mauer is full-time moving to first base. I feel like this is going to be a big move for him. He's going to have his legs. He's not going to have to worry about collisions. He's not going to worry about calling games, although I'm sure he'll still help Pinto and Suzuki managing the pitchers just with his knowledge of the team. But I think Mauer's going to have a better power season because of that. And I expect big things from Pinto, but kind of like the White Sox just bouncing around. There's not much to talk about outside of a few players for positives. Everything has come.
Their catching situation.
Yeah, that's what I was just talking about Pinto. But
Yeah.
everything good about this team is about 3-4 years away in terms of making major league wins for the team. Kyle, you want to just touch on the Twins?
Yeah, it's just kind of Jason Kubel's their DH. That's kind of whatever. When I look at their roster, I would think they're like 3 years out, and they seem to think they're 2 years out, which to me I find interesting because they're really banking on Sano and Buxton and Myers.
Alex Meyer and then Cole Stewart, who they just drafted last year.
They're really banking on these guys to be the end all for them. Now
Pan
that
out.
Mauer's at first, and going to be their cornerstone player, who hopefully can last a lot more games now. It's kind of an unfortunate time to be a fan at Target Field. Hopefully, you guys get a little bit of excitement this year by seeing Mauer hit over 25 home runs, or maybe Pinto becomes like a star. Maybe Nolasco wins 10 games. It's not looking good for you guys. There's just a lot of holes right now. You're a rebuilding franchise who seems to think they're 2 years away. So maybe you guys surprise somebody and you win 45, 50 games. I just don't see it. But
I mean, this team is worse to me than the Astros were last year, but I think that they just
maybe. They didn't have a Mauer though.
Yeah, I mean, this team
and Willingham could hit 30 home
this
runs
team to
again.
me is just really bad.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm just running my mouth saying that they're worse than the Astros. I don't like this team at all. I don't. There's not much to talk about. I mean,
can't believe Correa's your second pitcher.
I don't know. But
He's so underwhelming. I watched him pitch like 3 times last
who's
year.
trading for Glenn Perkins?
The Sonics. Just kidding.
Glenn Perkins was good at it. Kyle, look at his numbers. He was actually really, really good last year.
Was he?
Yeah. He had a 2.30 ERA, a 0.93 WHIP. He had 77 strikeouts and 62 innings closing games for the Minnesota Twins, where he still got 36 saves. So I mean, Glenn Perkins is a good closer. Nolasco's useful. I mean, Phil Hughes, I think, is going to have a better year. I really like Pinto, but there's only one player I want to ask you over-unders on, and that's Joe Mauer before we sign off.
All right, let's do it.
Joe Mauer, over-under 25 home runs.
Over.
I will take the under, but it's going to be very close. I expect him to double the home run output from the last couple of years and be over 20 for sure. Joe Mauer, over-under 90 RBI.
Under. I just don't think there's going to be enough people on base for him.
I will take the over on that.
Okay.
Over under 400 on base percentage.
Over.
I agree. I think that he might get he could even get 420.
Yeah.
And will he have more walks than strikeouts?
Yes.
I agree completely.
Even
he's done it
for
a few.
fences,
Yep.
but it's still.
He's done it a few times. He didn't do it last year, but he did it the year before, and he's done it about 5 times in his career, and that's really hard to do, and it just shows how good of a hitter he is. And he's only 30, and it feels like he's been around forever.
Would he be a guy they would trade? If the load was right?
I
don't know what team would be.
The salary's an issue. $23 million, so hard for teams to pick that up.
It is.
I could definitely see a Boston Red Sox moving him back to catcher. They have the financial resources they want to spend and use it.
Great catching depth, though.
Well, they don't have top end catching like that though. And then they also could just
Not yet.
what if they don't want to extend David Ortiz and they move Napoli to DH and then put Mauer at first base the next year? I mean, there's options for them.
And they definitely have the prospects to get it done.
Yes.
I don't think Minnesota would mortgage.
I don't think
their
they would
fan
trade
base
him.
like that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to think about.
That was just the first
it
team that
helped
popped
them
up in
rebuild
my
faster.
head. Yeah. But there aren't many teams that can afford that contract.
No.
I mean, the Dodgers don't have a catcher.
That's true.
That's
They do have a
interesting.
pretty good first baseman, though.
Yeah, but what if they think Mauer can catch? Which at this point, can he? Yes. Would I make him catch? No.
Yeah.
I would rather keep that bat healthy. Same reason I think Buster Posey should be a first baseman.
He's so good at catching, though.
Yeah, he is. Just like Mauer was, though.
Yeah.
Mauer was incredible catching, with
Yeah.
being huge, by the way.
Yeah, Posey does need to move.
Mauer might be the
eventually,
biggest
but-
catcher I've seen, that was still that good defensively. 6'5", 230, he was still above average. Not elite, but above average defensively.
Yeah.
I mean, he's bigger than the Molinas in terms of height.
Yeah, no, he's a big boy.
I mean, he's weighs more than Yadier, I think. Definitely does not weigh more than Benji Molina. So, anything else you want to add, Kyle, before we sign off?
Let's just keep your chin up, Twins. It's
Or Mauer.
Yeah, I guess Mauer. I think he's still gonna be the same guy. It's a clubhouse. So, hopefully you guys get some good attendance, support your team, keep that money up there so they can continue to spend.
That new ballpark looks beautiful.
Yeah, it's really cool. I went to Target Field like 2 years ago or something. It was sweet. It was cool. Really cool. It's in a cool spot of town too. There's like this overpass like 30 feet away from it where you can totally slam MD 2020 before you go into the game. Makes the Twins way more fun to watch.
Yeah, I really
You have to
like.
be over 21 to drink, by the way.
Yes, I really like Minnesota and Minneapolis. I've never been. I've always wanted to. I've actually thought about moving there and had legit discussions about it. And
Cool town.
having 3 sports teams there, they're getting a new Viking stadium. Hopefully, K-Love stays. I just really think Minnesota's a really cool, chill city from what I've seen.
Cool college place too.
Yeah, University
Campuses are
of Minnesota,
beautiful.
massive. So we're gonna sign off. Cranked out 2 this week, and hopefully maybe we can do 2 more next week. Kyle, coming up with the NL West and then the highly controversial American League West, where you might just ignore the other divisions and only speak about 2 teams. That's definitely been thought about.
Yeah.
In the future, I'm sure we'll do a podcast about the NBA before the playoffs.
Yeah.
NFL draft, NFL free agency, MLB predictions.
Yeah. The NFL
So,
draft. Everyone keep an eye on for that podcast. It's gonna be really interesting.
Yeah, we should probably just do that during spring break and just literally record all fucking day.
That'd be cool.
They'll be in
We have to
early
like
April.
do a nice research period though too.
Well, that's.
But yeah, we will.
Anywho, thanks for listening, everyone. Have a good night.
Yep. See ya.